Okay, so thanks for clicking on this. I know that making kitchen appliances in Blender might not sound very intriguing, but I was like halfway through making another video when I realized I'm actually not a professional 3D artist and maybe I should do something a little easier. So here I am. And there you are. Delete the camera and also delete the point like Before I started to make these scrumptious appliances of kitchen, I needed something to put all of them on. Obviously, I don't know about your food making situation, but personally, the tools in my kitchen don't levitate. I have tried. You can try if you want and get back to me, but I think they'd be too heavy. I wanted to do something a little fancy schmancy, so I looked up marble countertop. I saw this design and said, "Get me! That's mine now!" But it turns out that 3D art doesn't actually work like that, and I guess you have to actually make stuff. To actually get started on this darn table, I took whatever you call a 3D rectangle and added a texture to it. All of the details for this table are going to be in the texture. I took a default wave texture and added some distortion and detail, which made it significantly less wavy. Then I made the main color of the countertop a slightly off-white, like in my reference image. Since it's a countertop and you'll be interacting with it quite a lot, assuming you're not streamer brained and you just order delivery for all of your one meal a day, the corners and edges should be rounded off for a nice, smooth finish. To complete the countertop, I duplicated the entire texture and rotated it so not every line is going in the same direction, and some overlap each other, like in my reference. For our first actual kitchen appliance, I have to make a blender, which I'm sure hasn't been done before, right? I wanted to do an old school looking design, so I found this and used it as my reference image. The base of the blender sort of starts off as more of a square and slowly transitions to a circle, so I started off with a cube and modeled it from there. I got the basic shape of the base done first, and since the top of the model was smaller than the bottom, when I rounded off the corners, the bottom was more square and the top was a circle to make it accurate to the reference image. I added a feet by just extending a part of the bottom and adding thickness to it. The ridges extruding from the sides were next. Then I moved the top back a little so that the front would be tilting up more, and added the colors. I was almost done with the base portion of the blender. The final thing was to add a little tag thing to the dial. Next up was the glass part of the blender. I thought this part would be harder because of these ridges, but it turns out it was actually super easy. All I had to do was use a magical button called the Subdivision Surface Modifier, and all of my problems went away. The handle was fairly simple. I just made the basic shape I wanted with edges, then converted the edges to a curve. And in the curve settings, there's an option to add depth to the curve. Okay, all that sounds very boring. Let me just finish the lid and then, oh, I'm already done. Okay, here's what our first kitchen appliance in Blender looks like. Not too bad if I say so myself. Not too bad. But of course, the title of this video would be incomplete without creating more than one kitchen appliance. Next up, we have my personal fourth favorite way of heating up french fries, the microwave. We are, again, starting with a box. This time around though, the shaping is a lot easier, mostly because a microwave is a box. The feet should have been literally the easiest thing to add to this model, but what I did was only add one of the feet, then I added a mirror modifier so that it would perfectly mirror to the other corners of the microwave. But for some reason, in the middle of making the microwave, it stopped working and I didn't fix it until the very end. But anyways, after that, I made the front facing part of the microwave by adding another, smaller box in front of the big box. I separated it into two different panels and added that weird barrier between the outside of the window and the microwave. I honestly just couldn't be bothered making a curved handle like this, so I went with a simpler modern handle. That's all for the main shape, onto the textures now. The windows on microwaves have an interesting texture that kind of messes with your eyes. I tried recreating it by adding a brick texture, which is really just a bunch of rectangles, and plugging it into the normal. Normals are basically magic. It's just a 2D texture, but the texture interacts with light like it's a 3D object, so you can get a lot of detail in a model without adding any actual geometry. It's used all the time in 3D to save computing resources. I think I did a pretty good job replicating the window effect, considering I wasn't even using the right shape. Just a few finishing touches were left. I smoothed everything out, added these holes, and it seems like there's something missing. What could it be? No idea. In other news, the scale of everything was off, so I brought Barnaby in for scale. I also fixed that feed issue I was talking about roughly 74 seconds ago. Alright, that seems about done. Nothing else to do. Okay, yeah, I had to add all 300 of these unnecessary buttons. Except I actually just grabbed an image of the buttons that I found on an unnamed search engine and added that to the microwave. That was about it for our trusty old microwave. We can now make chicken pot pie in 2 minutes instead of 90 minutes in the oven. Oh, also I made the door be able to swing, so that's pretty fun. I hate myself, and that's why I decided to make this. Look at how complex this is. There's this, and this, and this, which turns into this. But as my favorite Buzz Lightyear quote says, you must take everything one step at a time. So I went on to make the first segment of the mixer, the base. It's pretty simple, relative to the top part, at least. I just applied the Subdivision Surface Modifier to a simple shape and messed around with it a bunch. Also, yes, I did start from a cube again. Okay, the base is done. Next was the bit with a lot of strange shapes. I matched the bottom to align with the top of the base, roughly. I rounded off the top and made sort of a bread loaf shape, then extruded the whole thing forward. I should have done this the proper way, but I went a little Insano style with it and just straight up added a separate object to act as the cylinder extruding downwards from the rest of the mixer. It looks okay, but it's a lot messier, and it's not perfectly aligned. I just finished the back by rounding it off. I couldn't figure out how to get this shape, and I didn't feel like spending hours on the back of a standing mixer. The whole thing is a little touch too red though. To improve the detail, I added silver highlights around the model. The best part of using a standing mixer is spending 40 seconds trying to figure out how the attachment is supposed to lock onto the spinny bit. So I recreated that amazing feeling here. Also, while searching for that clip you just saw of someone taking a mixer attachment off that I reversed to look like someone putting a mixer attachment on, I found this KitchenAid instructional video and I did not know that you could put attachments on this knob thing. I never knew that's what it was for. This is an incredible revelation that I will not get over for a while. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just surprised. Back to your regularly scheduled programming that's actually not scheduled at all, as it is completely on demand. I made the other half of the attachment experience, the actual attachment itself. I used the same technique that I used earlier for the blender handle, shaping what I want with a curve, then adding thickness to that curve. Then it was as simple as duplicating and rotating it several times. The shape is a little off, but don't worry, because you won't be able to tell since the bowl will be covering it up. Actually, the bowl also looks a little off. Well, what can you do, I guess? The textures look a little flat. I spiced them up a little by plugging a random noise texture into the roughness. When plugged into the roughness, the complete black parts of the texture make the object completely shiny, while the white parts completely rough, and the gray parts are somewhere in between. Or maybe it's the other way around, I don't remember. But if you add a color ramp, you can change the black parts to be a bit lighter and the white parts to be a bit darker, so you can change how dramatic you want the changes in roughness to be on your object. I did this to the rest of the appliances before moving on to the next one. Speaking of the next one, it's a kettle. And not one of those lame electric kettles. If you're using a kettle and it doesn't even whistle, why even use a kettle? The whole point of a kettle is to hear it go eeeeee. But anyway, yes, I also started with a cube for this in case literally one single soul was wondering. I formed this weird looking dome shape that also happens to be the same shape as a kettle. Strange coincidence. I extruded the bottom of the kettle to make this metal plate part. I mean, the whole thing is metal, but this part is especially metal. Now, this was as good of a time as any to apply the textures. The main color is a shade of teal because I like it, and also I was going to go with a light blue, but the blender is already light blue. The spout was pretty straightforward, not much to say besides I really should have rotated it in object mode instead of edit mode, so I could have used its local axes instead of having to use global axes. I used a different technique for this handle than I used for any of the other handles. That was stupid, but don't worry. I used the original technique for the bigger handle. For the thicker part of the handle, I just extruded everything out and made it black. Here it is next to all of our other magnificent kitchen appliances. Okay, yeah, it's a bit cramped. I had to move everything around. Okay, there, that's better. Here it is rendered. Look at it, it's glorious. The past 8 minutes of your life have been leading up to this. Oh, and also the microwave. It didn't fit with everything else. Maybe you'll get to see that other video that's taking me a long time if you subscribe. Okay, goodbye.